It's 3 in the morning. The baby has been crying for 40 minutes. You fed her, changed her, rocked her, walked the hallway in the dark 17 times. You've tried. The white noise app, the swaddle, the pacifier. You've Googled things you're embarrassed to admit Googling. Nothing is working, and the silence when she briefly stops feels less like relief and more like anticipation, the held breath before the next wave. And somewhere in the back of your exhausted mind, beneath the fog of sleeplessness and the quiet panic, a thought creeps in that you'd never say out loud. I don't know what I'm doing. Most parents in the Western world have been in that exact moment. Many of them live there, not for one night, but for weeks, sometimes months, cycling through sleep advice that contradicts itself, methods that worked for someone else's baby, books that promised solutions and delivered more questions. Here's what's strange. In Japan, this specific kind of night, the prolonged, inconsolable, nothing works night, is genuinely uncommon. Not because Japanese babies are somehow different, not because Japanese parents are more patient or better prepared or in possession of some secret passed down through generations, but because they approach the entire question of infant sleep from a completely different set of assumptions. And those assumptions, it turns out, are not cultural quirks. They are biology. The first thing worth understanding is what Western sleep culture is actually built on, because most of us absorbed it so completely we've never questioned the foundation. Over the past century, Western infant care philosophy has been shaped by a recurring theme: independence. The idea that a baby should learn to be alone, to self-settle, to occupy their own space as early as possible. This manifested in separate nurseries, scheduled feedings, and eventually the various forms of sleep training that fill parenting forums today, some gentler, some not. All of them rooted in the same premise, that the goal is for the baby to function without the parent present. The intention behind all of this has always been good. Parents were told that structure creates security, that boundaries teach self-reliance, that a baby who learns to sleep alone develops better habits. But the framework contains an assumption that developmental science has been quietly complicating for 30 years, the assumption that infant independence is something to be cultivated from birth, rather than something that emerges naturally once the conditions for security have first been established. Japanese parenting doesn't start from the question of how to teach a baby to sleep. It starts from a different question entirely. How do I understand my baby well enough that the conditions for sleep are already in place? That reframe, from instruction to understanding, is the entire philosophy in one sentence. The Japanese concept behind this orientation is called ame. It was first described by the psychiatrist Takeo Doi in the 1970s, and it doesn't have a clean English equivalent, which is probably part of why Western culture never fully absorbed what it describes. The closest translation is something like the expectation of being understood without having to ask, a deep, cellular-level trust that one's needs will be known before they are voiced. In adult relationships, ame can look like dependency. Applied to a newborn, it describes something entirely different, the precondition for a nervous system that doesn't need to escalate in order to be heard. A baby operating within ame doesn't need to build to a full cry to get a response. The signal, the slight tension, the changed breathing, the restless shifting, is read and met before it becomes distress. And a nervous system that consistently experiences this learns, at a biological level, that the world is responsive, that needs are met, that there is no emergency. That learned sense of safety, established in the first weeks and months, has measurable consequences in sleep. It has measurable consequences in behavior at age 2. It has measurable consequences in anxiety levels at age 10. The research on early secure attachment is among the most consistent in all of developmental psychology. The beginning matters more than we've been told. Now, ame is an orientation, not a technique. You can't schedule it or install it over a weekend, but embedded within it are specific practices that Japanese mothers apply to sleep, almost instinctively, that the neuroscience of infant development fully supports. The first is environmental. A newborn's circadian rhythm, the internal biological clock that governs sleep and wake cycles, is not yet developed at birth. The suprachiasmatic nucleus, the brain region responsible for regulating these cycles, is still forming. It doesn't fully mature until somewhere around 3 to 4 months. What shapes it during that window? more than almost anything else, is environmental consistency: light, temperature, sound, smell. Japanese mothers, almost universally, maintain a sleeping environment that is significantly darker, quieter, and more thermally stable than the typical Western nursery. Not because of some written rule, but because the cultural instinct is to keep the baby's world small and predictable while that brain is still wiring itself. The typical Western nursery, designed with warmth and good intentions, introduces a level of sensory complexity that a newborn's nervous system is not equipped to process as neutral. A nightlight provides constant light input. A sound machine adds continuous audio stimulation. A monitor adds more. None of these things are harmful individually, but together, they create an environment considerably more stimulating than the one the human infant nervous system evolved in, which is to say, close to a warm adult body in a dark, quiet space. The Japanese sleeping arrangement called kawa no ji, meaning the shape of the river, places the baby between the parents on the sleeping surface. The infant sleeps inside a physical landscape it already knows: the smell of the mother, the warmth of two bodies, the sound of familiar breathing. The nervous system doesn't need to adapt to a new environment each night. It already knows where it is. The transition to sleep in a familiar landscape is a fundamentally different physiological experience than the transition in a crib in the separate room. The second practice is simpler than it sounds and more powerful than most parents expect. Japanese parents narrate the transition to sleep. Not a lullaby necessarily, though those exist in every culture. Something more specific, a brief, consistent verbal signal delivered in the same tone, at the same moment, every single night. It doesn't need to be a full phrase, something as simple as a low, quiet, "Time to sleep now. I'm here. You're safe." Said the same way, always. The infant brain at this stage cannot understand language. What it can do, extraordinarily well, is recognize patterns. Patterns of sound, of touch, of rhythm, of sequence. A verbal cue, repeated hundreds of times in exactly the same context, becomes a powerful conditioned signal. The brain begins to associate those specific sounds with the physiological state of winding down, and over time, the signal itself begins to trigger the wind down before the other conditions are even fully in place. Cortisol drops, melatonin begins to rise, the body starts the process of entering sleep before the parent has finished speaking. This is not magic. It is Pavlovian conditioning applied to neuroscience, which is exactly how the brain is designed to work. The consistency is what makes it work. The same words, same voice, same moment. Not a different song each night depending on what feels right. The same signal, every time. This is one of those practices that requires almost no effort and produces a compounding return that becomes dramatically visible after 4 to 6 weeks of consistent application. The third piece is about morning, not night, which surprises most Western parents. Japanese caregivers expose babies to natural light within the first 30 minutes of waking. Not a lamp, not a screen, actual daylight, near a window, consistently. This seems disconnected from the problem of nighttime sleep. It is, in fact, one of the most powerful inputs for shaping it. Morning light is the primary Zeitgeber, the German word meaning time giver, for the human circadian clock. Light received through the eyes in the first hour after waking signals the suprachiasmatic nucleus to anchor the start of the biological day. That anchor point then determines with remarkable consistency when the body will be ready for sleep approximately 14 to 16 hours later. A baby who gets consistent morning light develops a circadian rhythm that is measurably more regular than a baby whose light environment is inconsistent. More predictable sleep onset, less frequent night waking, and when night waking does occur, shorter duration, because the body's biological pressure toward sleep is aligned with the clock. Japanese homes, which tend toward large windows and less reliance on blackout curtains during the day, create this morning light exposure almost automatically. For Western parents in apartments with heavier window treatments, it requires a deliberate choice, but it is an easy one. Carry the baby to a window. Sit near natural light while nursing in the morning. 10 minutes is enough to register. The final piece is perhaps the most counterintuitive. Japanese parents don't respond to every sound a baby makes at night, not because they're indifferent. They are paying close attention, but because they've learned to distinguish between sounds that require a response and sounds that are simply part of the sleep cycle moving forward. Babies move through sleep cycles approximately every 45 to 50 minutes. At the junction between cycles, the transition from deeper sleep back toward lighter sleep, most infants stir, make sounds, sometimes whimper or briefly vocalize. In the West, parents trained to respond immediately to any sound will often intervene at exactly this moment. In doing so, they interrupt a baby who was in fact about to help the transition and return to deeper sleep without any help. The Japanese practice is to wait. Listen actively. Give it 60 to 90 seconds before responding. In that small window, a significant percentage of sleep cycle transitions resolve themselves. The parent who waits is not being neglectful. They're making a distinction that allows the baby's self-settling capacity, which is real even in very young infants, to function. This is part of the same broader orientation. Reading the baby carefully, not reacting uniformly to all signals. Learning the language of your specific infant. Which sounds are distress and which sounds are just movement. Put together, the consistent sleep environment, the verbal ritual, the morning light, and the attentive but patient approach to night sounds. What you have is not a sleep training method. It's a set of biological conditions under which infant sleep becomes more natural, more regular, and less of a nightly emergency. Japanese parents don't think of it as a system. It's simply how things are done, transmitted automatically through community and culture without it ever needing to be written in a fist-on or book or debated on a forum. But the neuroscience now exists to explain every piece of it. Keep the sleep environment dark, quiet, and warm. Choose a verbal signal and use it every single night without variation. Get your baby near natural light within 30 minutes of morning waking, and when the baby stirs at night, give it a full 60 seconds before you move. None of these require a product, none require a program, none require you to endorse something that feels wrong. They require consistency and the patience to let the biology do what it was designed to do. If this gave you something useful, subscribe. This channel goes this deep every time.